You checked the price on a Sam's Club membership last month and thought about canceling it. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you figured you had most of what you needed anyway. A few cases of water, some canned food, maybe a flashlight. That kind of thinking is exactly what this list is going to dismantle. I spent years working in environments where supply chain failure was not a hypothetical. It was a Tuesday. And the thing that separates people who get through those situations from people who do not is never the expensive gear. It is almost always the cheap, boring, multifunction items that nobody photographs for Instagram. The items on this list cost between $5 and $24 each at Sam's Club. Every single one is backed by a specific field manual or military technical bulletin. And one of them, the one that costs $10 and treats 7,000 gallons of water, is almost certainly sitting under your kitchen sink right now, and you have never thought of it as a survival tool. Everything in this list comes out of the same field manual framework that military logisticians use to evaluate what actually goes in a pack versus what looks good on a gear shelf. That framework is in the field reference linked in the description if you want the full doctrine behind any of these. Several of these items have been quietly leaving Sam's Club shelves since early spring, not because of a disaster, because the people who know what they are looking at are buying in bulk and not talking about it. Here is what they are taking. Contractor-grade 55-gallon drum liners. The heavy ones, not the thin kitchen bags, not the lawn and leaf bags, not anything with a scent strip or a drawstring. The flat-bottom 3mm polyethylene contractor bags, sold in a 50-count box for somewhere between $15 and $22. Field Manual 21-10, which is the Army's Field Hygiene and Sanitation Manual, treats large-gauge poly liners as a sanitation-critical supply in the same category as water purification tablets. Not a convenience item, not a trash item, a sanitation-critical supply. Here is why that distinction matters. A standard kitchen bag is 0.7 to 0.9 mils thick. That is less than 1 mil. Under any lateral stress, a sharp piece of debris, the edge of a container, foot traffic, it fails. It cannot hold water without immediate seam failure. It cannot serve as a ground moisture barrier because a single footstep punctures it. The contractor bag at 3 mils is a completely different tool that happens to look identical on the shelf. The Army uses these for improvised latrine lining, waste isolation, and water collection. A 55-gallon drum liner suspended by its corners into a low center depression can collect and hold over 30 gallons of rainwater without seam failure. Worn over clothing during ashfall or chemical contamination events, it becomes an improvised outer barrier, laid flat under a sleeping position. It blocks ground-conducted cold and moisture, and ground-conducted cold kills faster than ambient air temperature because conduction strips heat from the body at a rate radically higher than convection. The sleeping bag on top of wet ground loses its thermal fight. The 3mm poly barrier under the sleeping bag changes the equation entirely. In the Superdome, after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the disease vector that spread fastest was not the water. Federal Emergency Management Agency after-action reports documented that field sanitation failure was the primary driver of illness within 48 hours. The units that contained illness within their perimeter were the ones that maintained waste, isolation, discipline using available poly sheeting. The difference between a functional sanitation zone and a disease vector was 3 mils of polyethylene. 50-count box at Sam's Club. Kit total, $19. Mylar emergency blankets. Bulk pack. 10 to 20 count depending on the season. $12 to $16. Most people think of these as something you wrap around a cold person and wait for help. Survival evasion, resistance, and escape-trained personnel think of them primarily as signaling devices that also happen to keep you warm. That is not a small distinction. The specific number that matters here is 97%. That is, the solar radiation reflectance rating of aluminized polyethylene mylar. It is the same optical property that retains your body heat and makes the blanket detectable by search aircraft at distances documented in Air Force survival evasion resistance and escape materials as exceeding 10 miles under direct sunlight. It is one number doing two completely different jobs simultaneously. Army Techniques Publication 4-0 to 2.1 and Field Manual 4-25.11. Both specify aluminized polyethylene thermal barriers for hypothermia prevention in casualty care. The sleeping bag that costs $200 and is rated to 20 below zero loses approximately 80% of its insulative value when wet, because loft-dependent insulation requires air pockets that collapse under moisture. Mylar retains its 97% reflectance and thermal function regardless of saturation, because it works by radiation reflection, not air pocket insulation. Wet conditions do not change the physics. The Joplin, Missouri tornado in 2011 was an enhanced Fujita 5 that destroyed the regional hospital and ran search and rescue operations for over 72 hours in variable weather. Search and rescue after-action reports noted that reflective signaling materials were among the most consistently useful items for locating survivors in debris fields where vocal signaling was impossible due to structural noise. 1 item. 2 jobs: survivor warmth and survivor location. At the Sam's Club bulk price of about 93 cents per blanket versus $19.95 for a single branded retail bivvy. 15 blankets from Sam's Club cost less than 1 retail unit. The bivvy is not 15 times better. Running cost: $33. $5.50 paracord. Bulk spool: 100 to 200 feet depending on what is in stock. $18 to $26. The military designation is Type 3 paracord, and the governing specification is Military Specification C5040 Hotel. That document specifies a minimum 550-pound tensile strength with a 7-strand nylon inner core construction. That specification is a published technical standard with pass-fail testing criteria. It is not branding. Here is the problem with the paracord bracelets at gas stations and craft stores, and the paracord-style rope sold in survival retail packaging. Non-compliant cord frequently has hollow cores, or 2 to 3 strand inner construction, rather than the required 7 strands. That drops actual tensile strength to between 150 and 200 pounds, while the label says 550. There is no visual way to distinguish compliant from non-compliant cord without cutting it open and counting the inner strands. The 7-strand inner core is the point. People buy paracord thinking about the outer sheath. Military users buy it thinking about what is inside. A 100-foot spool of military specification 550 cord contains 700 linear feet of usable individual strand, fine enough for suturing gear, strong enough for fishing line, thin enough to thread through any eyelet. Field Manual 21-76 cites paracord across multiple sections, including shelter construction, gear rigging, and snare construction. It is in the doctrine because the inner strand extraction capability alone makes it worth carrying independent of any load-bearing use. After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, Federal Emergency Management Agency Logistics after-action documentation noted repeated improvised rigging failures during debris removal operations in New Jersey coastal communities, specifically attributing those failures to non-rated cordage used by civilian volunteers. Units using military surplus. Military specification cordage completed the same rigging tasks without failure. The load rating gap between decorative paracord and military specification C5040 hotel-compliant cord became operationally visible within the first 48 hours. Sam's Club spool at $22, 30 cents less per foot than the branded survival retail equivalent for cord that may not even cite the specification. Total so far, $55. Unscented concentrated liquid chlorine bleach, 8.25% sodium hypochlorite concentration, 2-pack of 121-ounce jugs, $8 to $12. Technical Bulletin Medical 577 is the Army's published field water treatment standard. Table 3-1 of that document specifies the exact treatment ratio. 8 drops of 8.25% sodium hypochlorite per gallon of clear water. 30-minute contact time before consumption. Not a suggestion. A published technical bulletin with tested efficacy data. 2 jugs from Sam's Club at that treatment ratio gives you approximately 7,000 gallons of treated drinking water for $10. The potable aqua water purification tablets you see in every survival kit on Amazon treat 25 gallons per package at $8.99 per package. 7,000 gallons of treatment capacity using those tablets costs $2,520. The field manual protocol costs $10. You need to buy unscented. That is not a preference. Scented bleach contains additional chemical compounds that are unsafe for consumption even after treatment. Splashless bleach contains thickening agents, typically polyethylene glycol, that alter the sodium hypochlorite activity and are not on the Technical Bulletin Medical 577 approved treatment list. The label says bleach. The chemistry disqualifies it. Unscented, 8.25%. That is the entire purchase specification. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, Centers for Disease Control field reports documented that waterborne illness was the primary secondary health threat in the weeks following the storm. Field teams, distributing unscented sodium hypochlorite solution with written treatment ratios, documented measurable reductions in waterborne illness compared to untreated water communities. The treatment protocol cost pennies per gallon and required no equipment, no batteries, no pump, no filter, a bottle, a dropper, a ratio that fits on an index card. The most battle-tested water treatment system in the Army's field manual library is already under your sink. The prepper industry spent 30 years convincing you to buy something more complicated. Out of pocket, $65. The link to the full field reference collection is in the description. It covers 47 additional items across water filtration, shelter materials, communications, food storage, and medical supply. Everyone doctrine-backed. Everyone under $30. Takes 30 seconds to find it. Then come back here. Because the next item is the one that reveals how a 4 mil wall thickness is the difference between protection and theater in a disaster environment. Nitrile exam gloves. Bulk box. 150 to 200 count. 4 mil nitrile. $16 to $22. Army Regulation 385-10. The Army Safety Program mandates nitrile specifically for petroleum product handling, chemical exposure, and biological contamination scenarios. Because latex fails against hydrocarbon penetration. Latex is natural rubber. It is petroleum soluble. It degrades on contact with fuel, solvents, and oils. The exact contamination scenarios most common in a disaster environment. The vinyl disposable gloves from the dollar store have a 1 to 2 mil wall thickness. They fail the ASTM D6319 permeation testing standard against virtually all hydrocarbons. They are food service gloves sold as protection. They provide neither. 4 mil nitrile passes ASTM D6319 for chemical permeation resistance against petroleum distillates. That means fuel handling, oil, solvents. Skin stays clean. During the Deepwater Horizon response in 2010, Environmental Protection Agency field team after-action reports documented that volunteer responders who handled oil-contaminated wildlife and debris without adequate nitrile protection sustained dermal hydrocarbon absorption that required medical evaluation. Responders, equipped with 4 mil nitrile throughout the operation, completed the same tasks without recordable exposure incidents. The difference was 4 mils of synthetic rubber between skin and crude oil, at 9 cents per glove from Sam's Club versus 50 cents per glove from branded survival and contractor retail channels on Amazon. For a 20-count box, the Sam's Club price delivers 4 times the count for 72% less per unit. Running cost, $83. Now slow down for a second. Iodized salt, 25-pound bag, $5 to $8. This one requires a complete reframe before you hear the rest of it. Sodium chloride is a mineral. It has no biological degradation pathway. The survival industry markets salt in nitrogen-flushed number 10 cans with 25-year shelf life, claims at prices between $5 and $7.50 per pound. Sam's Club sells the same sodium chloride molecule in a 25-pound bag for 24 cents a pound. The nitrogen flushing is not protecting the salt. The nitrogen flushing is protecting the marketing claim on a product that would last 2,500 years in a sealed container without it. You are paying a 30 times markup for drama applied to an immortal mineral. Field Manual 10-23. Army Food Service Operations specifies salt as a Category 1 essential field ration component and documents field food preservation techniques. The math on why this matters is specific. Salt curing protein for preservation requires approximately 1 pound of salt per 4 pounds of protein. A single large game animal yields 40 to 80 pounds of meat. Preserving that yield at minimum requires 10 to 20 pounds of salt. The person with 2 grocery store canisters has enough salt for table seasoning and nothing else. Field Manual 21-10 documents the preparation of isotonic saline solution for wound irrigation using field-available materials. Roughly 1 teaspoon of salt per pint of boiled water, producing a 0.9% sodium chloride solution for irrigation use only, not treatment. Irrigation. The distinction is important, and the manual makes it clearly. During the Sarajevo siege from 1992 to 1996, documented accounts from aid workers and siege survivors consistently identified salt, cooking fat, and matches as the 3 highest value barter commodities throughout nearly 4 years of urban grid-down conditions. Salt's value was not flavor. It was food preservation function in a population without reliable refrigeration. A 25-pound bag at Sam's Club represented months of preservation capacity. Barter leverage in a documented modern collapse economy. Total, so far, $91. White petroleum jelly. Bulk tub, 24 ounces, $7 to $12. The most effective fire-starting kit at Sam's Club is not in the sporting goods section. It is in the health and beauty aisle. Field Manual 21-76 documents petroleum jelly as a fire-starting accelerant when applied to natural tinder material. A cotton ball coated in petroleum jelly ignites and sustains flame for 4 to 8 minutes, significantly exceeding the 15 to 30-second burn time of untreated natural tinder. Here is why that time window matters. A ferrocerium rod produces a spark that exceeds 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit for a fraction of a second. In ideal conditions, with dry, fine tinder, that spark works. In wet conditions with saturated tinder, the spark contacts material that cannot sustain ignition long enough to build. The fire does not start. The petroleum-coated cotton ball extends available heat long enough for wet tinder to reach ignition temperature. You are not adding heat. You are adding time. Field Manual 31-70, the Army's basic cold weather manual, documents petroleum jelly-based products as mandatory skin care in sub-freezing operations, specifically to prevent windburn and frostbite progression on exposed skin. The same tub that starts your fire in wet conditions also prevents frostbite on your face. Applied to ferrous metal surfaces, it prevents oxidation during storage. Applied to leather, it waterproofs. Applied to threaded fasteners and mechanical surfaces, it lubricates. The UCO Survival Fire Kit on Amazon sells for $14.99 and contains a small tin of fire paste whose primary active ingredient is petroleum jelly with a colorant in a 1.5-ounce container. That is $10 per ounce. The Sam's Club bulk tub at $9 for 24 ounces is 37.5 cents per ounce for the identical chemistry. You are paying 96% less for the same molecule. During Texas Winter Storm Uri in February of 2021, households that maintained interior temperature using any available heat source, including improvised fire starting capability, fared measurably better than households with no supplemental heat. The British thermal unit output of a paraffin candle or a petroleum jelly fire is not metaphorical warmth. It is documented thermal physics. Running cost, $100. Duct tape. Multi-pack. 3 rolls at 60 yards each, $14 to $18. Military specification, T43374, is the military specification for duct tape, referred to in military supply as tape, pressure-sensitive, cloth, establishing a minimum tensile strength of 30 pounds per inch width with a woven polyethylene scrim backing. Standard retail grocery store duct tape commonly measures 18 to 22 pounds per inch. Tensile strength. That is up to 40% below the military minimum standard. It delaminates under sustained load. It fails in cold temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, as acrylic adhesive loses bonding strength. There is no visual way to distinguish it from military specification grade on the shelf. In September of 2001, hardware stores in Lower Manhattan were stripped of duct tape within hours, as residents attempted to seal apartments against the particulate contamination plume from the collapse. Federal Emergency Management Agency subsequently included duct tape in its official shelter-in-place kit recommendation for airborne contamination events. The demand event confirmed what field doctrine already established in Field Manual 5-34, Engineer Field Data. Duct tape is a contamination barrier material. Sealing windows and doors during airborne chemical, biological, or radiological particulate events is in the doctrine. The blister prevention application, applied to known friction points before sustained movement, is in field medicine, preventive guidance. The Sam's Club 3-roll pack at $16 gives you 180 yards at about 8.9 cents per yard. A single roll of Duck brand tape at a pharmacy runs 35 to 45 cents per yard. Same footage, 75% less money, 4 times the tape. Total so far, $116. 95 respirators. Bulk pack, 10 to 20 count. National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health certified, $20 to $28. The pre-pandemic framing of the 95 as a pandemic tool is one of the most expensive misunderstandings in preparedness culture, because it caused millions of people to ignore the respirator as a preparedness item for 30 years, and then panic buy it at 5 times markup when the one scenario they had not planned for arrived. National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health certification for a 95 means 95% minimum filtration efficiency for particles 0.3 microns and larger. That is the threshold that makes it functional against wildfire ash, volcanic particulate, industrial dust, post-earthquake structural debris containing asbestos, fiberglass, heavy metals, and silica, and yes, biological aerosols. Army Regulation 11-34, the Army Respiratory Protection Program, specifies National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health approved 95 filtering facepiece respirators as the minimum protection standard for particulate hazards. That regulation existed before 2020. It will exist after. The Camp Fire in Paradise, California, in 2018, created an air quality emergency across the northern Sacramento Valley for 17 days. National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health documented that 95 respirators were the minimum effective protection against the particulate matter 2.5 that drove the air quality index above 400 in affected areas. A surgical mask, during that event, was not partial protection. It was theater. The filtration gap between a surgical mask at 100 microns and a 95 at 0.3 microns is not a small difference in the same category. It is a completely different product class. The Sam's Club 20-count box at $24 costs $1.20 per National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health certified unit. The 3M Aura 95 at Amazon retail runs $3.50 to $4.50 per unit for the same National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health certification. National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health certification is pass-fail. A $1 2095 and a $4 5095 both cleared the same 0.3 micron filtration test. Running cost, $140. Bulk disposable lighters, 50-count pack, $10 to $14. Field manual, 21-76, identifies fire starting as a primary survival priority and places reliable ignition sources at the top of the starting hierarchy because they provide consistent spark and sustained flame, without the skill dependency of friction methods or the weather sensitivity of matches. Survival evasion resistance and escape curriculum at all levels includes disposable butane lighters as the first priority fire starting tool, carried by air crews and special operations personnel for that exact reason. A standard BIC lighter produces approximately 3,000 ignition before fuel exhaustion. That is the manufacturer specification. In an extended scenario involving daily cooking, water boiling, and heating, fire starting frequency increases dramatically. A single lighter is a consumable. The 50-count bulk pack at Sam's Club for $12 costs 24 cents per lighter, 24 cents for 3,000 ignitions. The UCO Stormproof Match Kit retails at $10.95 for 25 matches. Each match provides one ignition. The equivalent ignition capacity using storm matches would cost $65,700. The lighter is not as weatherproof as a storm match in extreme conditions. It provides effectively unlimited ignition capacity compared to any match-based system at any remotely comparable price. In Venezuela, starting around 2016, as documented by journalists and humanitarian workers on the ground during the economic collapse, disposable lighters became high-value barter items as infrastructure deteriorated and propane supply became unreliable. A single BIC lighter with a full sale cost under 50 cents traded for meaningful quantities of food and medicine in a documented modern collapse economy. The 50-count pack is not a fire-starting hobby. It is a currency reserve that fits in a shoebox. Total so far, $152. Paraffin pillar candles, unscented. Bulk pack of 6 to 12, $12 to $16. Field Manual 31-70 treats a candle as a heater that also makes light, not a light source that also makes warmth. That framing reversal changes how you deploy it. A standard paraffin pillar candle produces approximately 75 to 85 British thermal units per hour of thermal output in a sealed 10 cubic foot space, roughly the interior of a vehicle or a small tent. That output raises ambient temperature 10 to 15 degrees above outside temperature. In mild cold weather, that margin moves an occupant out of the hypothermia risk zone. Field Manual 31-70 documents this. It is not estimated comfort. It is documented thermal physics. The scented candles in home goods retail stores, the ones in the decorative glass jars from the brand names everyone recognizes, contain fragrance compounds, synthetic esters and aldehydes that when combusted in a sealed space produce volatile organic compound concentrations that cause headaches, nausea, and respiratory irritation. They do this at the exact moment you need the candle's heat most, which is when the space is sealed. Unscented paraffin burns clean. The chemistry of the candle you choose is not aesthetic. It is a safety specification. A standard 3 by 6 inch paraffin pillar candle burns for approximately 70 to 90 hours. 8 of them at Sam's Club for $14 gives you 640 total burn hours for 2.2 cents per hour of light and heat. The UCO Candle Lantern Kit, the survival retail staple, sells for $29.95 for the lantern alone and holds a single 9-hour UCO candle at $2.99 each. 640 hours of equivalent burn time using UCO candles costs approximately $213 in candles before the lantern cost. During Texas Winter Storm Uri in February of 2021, households with any supplemental heat source including a single candle in a vehicle with the windows cracked, maintained survivable interior temperatures. The households without any heat source did not control that outcome. Kit total: $166. 11 items. $166. Every one of them is a walk-in purchase at Sam's Club today, if the shelf has them. That last conditional matters. The nitrile gloves, the 95s, the mylar blankets, all three have documented post-2020 supply volatility, driven by institutional prepositioning, purchasing from hospital systems and municipal emergency management agencies. The bulk lighters and the contractor bags move seasonally. The bleach and the salt are stable, but stable does not mean indefinitely available at bulk pricing. What you have after watching this video is not a shopping list. You have a doctrinal framework. You can now look at any item on any shelf and run the same evaluation that military logisticians run. What is the primary technical specification? What is the civilian failure mode for the default alternative? What are the documented multifunction uses? And what does the math look like per capability unit versus purpose-built survival, retail alternatives? That evaluation is the skill. The Sam's Club list is just where it points today. Take the water treatment math from item 4. 8 drops of 8.25% unscented bleach per gallon, 30-minute contact time. Calculate how many gallons your household needs for 90 days. Drop that number in the comments. I will tell you exactly where you stand against the Technical Bulletin Medical 577 operational standard. If this kind of analysis is what you want more of, subscribe. The next video goes somewhere most preparedness content will not touch. And after today, you will understand why that gap exists.